You probably have a memory from early childhood you could describe in detail right now. The room, the light through the window, what someone was wearing, what they said. It feels like a home video stored somewhere in your head, accurate and preserved. Here is the problem. Almost every detail of that memory is probably wrong. And the person, memory is you. Memory is not a recording. This is one of the most solid findings in cognitive psychology, and one of the hardest for anybody to genuinely accept about themselves. When your brain does not open a file and play it back, it rebuilds the event out of fragments, using whatever pathways happen to be available at that moment, and fills the gaps with assumptions, expectations, and information you picked up long after the event was over. Every time you remember something, you are to some degree remembering the last time you remembered it, not the thing itself. Elizabeth Loftus spent decades proving how easily that reconstruction can be steered. In a study published in 1974, Loftus and her colleague John Palmer showed participants film of a car accident and then asked them how fast the cars had been going. One group was asked how fast the cars were going when they smashed into each other. Another group heard the word hit. A third heard collided. The smashed group estimated 41 miles per hour. The hit group said 34. The collided group said 32. Same film, same crash, one verb changed, and the estimates moved by nearly 10 miles an hour. Then, a week later, the researchers asked a second question. Did you see any broken glass? There was no broken glass anywhere in the film. The participants who had been asked the smashed version were far more likely to say yes. One word, inserted into a question, had put an object into their memory of an event they had watched with their own eyes, and they defended it with complete confidence. Loftus called this the misinformation effect, and it has since been replicated hundreds of times across dozens of laboratories, with different events and different kinds of false detail. Researchers have implanted memories of a stop sign that was really a yield sign, of a barn that never appeared in the film at all, of a red car that was blue. The false detail does not need to be dramatic. It needs to arrive through a leading question, a suggestive comment, or another person's account of the same event delivered confidently enough. And once it is incorporated, people's confidence in the fabricated detail is often indistinguishable from their confidence in the accurate ones. Loftus went further than details. The study, known as Lost in the Mall, began when her research assistant, Jim Cohn, gave his younger brother a booklet with 4 childhood stories in it. 3 real and 1 invented about getting lost in a shopping mall at the age of 5. After a few rounds of being asked to recall it, the brother not only believed it had happened, he began improving it. There was an old man who helped him. There was the fear. There were the clothes he had been wearing. He had built a full, detailed, first-person memory of an afternoon that never existed. Loftus turned the technique into controlled studies and found that roughly a quarter of participants developed a genuine false memory of being lost. In a later study built around Disneyland advertising, about a third of participants came to remember meeting and shaking hands with Bugs Bunny, a Warner Brothers character who has never been anywhere near Disneyland. Their brains manufactured an event, complete with sensory detail and emotion, and filed it next to the real ones, with nothing attached to mark the difference. What makes this genuinely strange is how ordinary the fabricated memories feel from the inside. Participants did not describe a hazy impression they were unsure about. They described texture, smell, the exact shape of the panic in their chest, specifics as rich as anything that had actually happened to them. Brain imaging since Loftus's early work finds that true and false memories light up strikingly similar patterns in the hippocampus and visual cortex, with some subtle differences in regions involved in checking sensory reality. Those differences are far too faint for a person to use. There is no internal alarm that goes off when a memory is invented. It simply feels the way remembering feels. Your own earliest memories are the largest example of this in your life. Adults almost never retain anything from before the age of about 3 because the machinery for storing autobiographical events is not finished yet, a phenomenon called childhood amnesia. What survives from just after that tends to be what researchers call fragment memories, isolated snapshots with no narrative attached. So the detailed account you have of your third birthday party is very unlikely to be a memory of the party. It is far more likely to be assembled from the story your parents told about that day, plus a photograph you have looked at many times, recombined by your brain into something that arrives in first person. When researchers check people's earliest memories against family records, they routinely find events dated a year or more too early and events the person could not possibly have witnessed. Loftus was caught by this herself, which is the detail of her career that most people never hear. Her mother drowned in a swimming pool when Loftus was 14. Decades later, at a family gathering around her 44th birthday, a relative told her that she had been the one who found the body. She had no such memory. But over the following days, it began to arrive. The pool, her mother face down, the police, her own reaction, details assembling themselves the way real memories do. Then the relative called back to say he had been mistaken. It was her aunt who found her mother. The world's leading authority on false memory had grown one in under a week from a single sentence spoken by someone she trusted. The mechanism behind all of this is now understood down to the cellular level, and it is not a bug. When you recall a memory, your brain reactivates the same pathways that fired during the original event, and the act of reactivating makes the memory temporarily unstable. For a window of a few hours, it sits in a labile state, editable, before being written back down, a process called reconsolidation. The amygdala tags the whole thing with emotional weight. Work by Karim Nader and Joseph Ledoux showed that in rats, blocking protein synthesis in the amygdala immediately after a fear memory was reactivated could weaken or erase it because the memory was never resaved. Clinical trials have since tried the same logic on people with PTSD, reactivating a traumatic memory under a drug that dampens the adrenaline response and restoring it at a lower intensity. The system evolved to keep memories current, not to keep them accurate. Every recollection is a save-over, which is why the memories you would bet money on. The morning after the Challenger shuttle exploded in January 1986, the psychologist Ulrich Neisser had students write down exactly how they had heard the news. 2.5 years later, he brought them back and asked again. About a quarter got every major detail wrong. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong person telling them. And their confidence had nothing to do with their accuracy. When some were shown the accounts in their own handwriting from the morning after, they recognized the handwriting and still insisted the newer version was what had really happened. This stops being an academic curiosity in a courtroom. Eyewitness testimony has historically been treated as the most persuasive evidence available to a jury, and it turns out to be remarkably unreliable. The Innocence Project has helped exonerate hundreds of wrongfully convicted people in the United States using DNA evidence, and in roughly 70% of those cases, the original conviction rested partly on mistaken eyewitness identification. Not liars. Not careless people. Confident, sincere witnesses whose memories had been quietly altered by leading questions, suggestive lineups, and time. Ronald Cotton's case is the clearest illustration of how that happens. In 1984, in Burlington, North Carolina, a young woman named Jennifer Thompson was raped in her apartment, and during the attack, she deliberately studied her attacker's face, determined to be able to identify him if she survived. She picked Cotton out of a photo array, and then picked him again out of a physical lineup, and afterward she was told she had identified the same man both times. She testified against him with total certainty. Cotton was convicted and spent 11 years in prison, part of it alongside a man named Bobby Poole, who bore a real resemblance to him. When Poole was brought into court, Thompson looked at him and said she had never seen him before in her life. In 1995, DNA testing proved Cotton innocent and identified Poole as the attacker. Thompson's memory had not been lazy. It had been assembled under terror and then reinforced every single time she picked the same face, each identification adding confidence to a memory that had drifted away from the truth. She and Cotton later became friends and wrote a book about it together. Cases like Cotton's are why identification procedures were rewritten. Many jurisdictions now run lineups double-blind, so the officer showing the photographs does not know which one is the suspect and cannot leak it, and record the witness's confidence at the moment of the first identification before feedback has a chance to inflate it. The most damaging demonstration of memory's malleability, though, happened in therapists' offices. Through the 1980s and 1990s, techniques built on hypnosis, guided imagery, and repeated suggestive questioning were used to help patients recover memories of childhood abuse. And some of those memories were later shown to be fabrications, planted not by malice, but by an authority figure asking leading questions, week after week, exactly the conditions Loftus had shown to work in a laboratory. In one 1988 case in Washington state, a sheriff's deputy named Paul Ingram was accused by his daughters and, under prolonged interrogation, produced detailed confessions to crimes investigators could find no evidence for. A sociologist studying the case, Richard Offshee, tested it directly. He described to Ingram an event that had never happened, and within a day Ingram had produced a detailed written account of it. Families were destroyed on both sides of these cases, and some never reassembled. Every memory you have is a reconstruction, not a recording, and each time you take one out, you write it back down slightly changed. After enough passes, the original is simply gone, replaced by a version that feels exactly as real and has been edited by your own brain without your knowledge or consent. Your most treasured memory may be substantially fabricated, assembled out of family stories, photographs, and your brain's best guess at what should have been there. You will never know which parts are real because the only instrument you have for checking is the same instrument doing the invention.